the time.
Sure.
So I'm going to check over here to see if it works. Yes, excellent connection. Great. We have an excellent connection, Con.
Excellent connection.
Excellent. All right. So, trying not to be right. Great. We have an excellent connection, Con.
Are we live? Excellent connection.
We are live. Excellent.
Oh,
All right.
we're live.
So, trying not to be right. Great. We have an excellent connection, Con.
Excellent. Are we live? Do you want to bring people in, or do we just want a dialogue? We don't even have to do any of the formalities, I guess.
Nah,
in
we
the
don't
interest
really.
of not trying to be right, right?
That's
thing.
right. That's the first thing we can do. We can start off by not trying to be
Not
right.
worrying
and how to do
about
this
trying
live
to be
stream.
right around how to bring everyone in at the beginning. Welcome all to blah blah blah.
Blah 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 blah. Welcome.
It's just two spirit brothers connecting and trying not to be right.
Why are we trying not to be right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that this was initially brought about randomly 2 weeks ago, and when you and I had a catch up, and we were talking about ideas for something like this, and every time we looked at reasons why, I noticed that there was a part of my personality that was trying to be righteous or right, or trying to correct what's wrong in the world and all that kind of stuff. And then I couldn't catching myself out, and you were helping me with that. And then we started to look into the definition of righteousness and self-righteousness. And then we actually realized that we may be a little bit misunderstood with regards to what it really means.
Oh yeah. Did you think about that more?
Yeah, I did. It's actually not what I was thinking. But I don't know, there's been a couple of people who basically said, you need to share more stuff online. There's a lot of uncertainty happening. I think I combine journeys as well, in terms of going deeper into the spiritual realm and inquiry into what's true and all that stuff, which is not necessarily what's right. And being able to have a dialogue, and there is a difference, I think.
What's that? Tell me about it. I want to pick on that. Difference between right and true.
Good point. Oh, that's a good one. Straight into it. Yeah, right. What's true and what's right? I think one's about morals, right? And one's about reality. I don't know. I'm just hearing a lot of people at the moment complaining about their rights. And, well, not complaining, like, really believing that they have rights. And some of the things that I'm going to say might be triggering for some people, but like it depends on what perspective you're looking at, right? Nature doesn't recognize your rights. And nature has the last word. And the path to liberation, if that's what you want to choose, is to give up any entitlement to rights. Having right, I have a right to. But these lockdowns and these limitations have really questioned and really makes everyone feel uncomfortable. And we realize that, things could always be worse, but we realize that our rights are being taken away from us. That's one perspective. And I think that what's happening right now is this challenge to wanting right and being entitled to my rights is causing so much suffering. I mean, that's the basis of culture. I'm right, you're wrong. And so I've got all these answers in the backup there, but then I'd feel if I shared them, they'd be righteous. So
Have you ever heard of the organismic rights? I think it's called.
yeah, I haven't heard of it, but I'm making some assumptions.
Hang on, let me look it up real quick.
Organismic or
yeah, organismic rights. I always forget the origin of it, but there are 5, and so it's there's a coach by the name of Christine Comerford, who was I'm not sure if she was like a colleague or a peer of some of my coaching mentors, and I'm not that familiar with her work, so I won't speak for it too much, but she popularized to some extent this concept of 5 organismic rights, and I won't go into the whole theory of it, but I'll tell you what they are. So, and you could probably understand that the basic concept is that as human beings, we have these 5 organismic rights. So there's the right to exist, the right to have needs, the right to take action, the right to have consequences for one's actions, and the right to love and be loved. Interesting, right?
I like him. Yeah, I like him.
So the theory goes with this is that any suffering is related to feeling a compromise in one or more of these rights. So when one of these rights we feel challenged intrinsically or extrinsically, we're suffering. If we feel we don't have the right to love and be loved, for example, that has its own associated problems. If we feel we don't have the right to have needs or the right to take action, yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah. I guess I want to introduce the concept of, or the reality, that there are multiple dimensions. That's one dimension, and it makes total sense from that dimension. The other dimension is that, like, you brought up the topic of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And our entitlement to our thoughts, feelings and sensations, which some of us numb out a lot, yeah. And the grab associated with those thoughts, feelings, sensations, so more or less, so more good stuff, less painful stuff, is the root cause of suffering in the first person experience. I mean, and so that's actually maybe at a meta level the way we can understand that there are the multiple aspects and phases, views through the dimensions, is to do with perspective, first person perspective, and the person perspective, and multi-person perspective. And I think for too long we've been indoctrinated into the third person perspective. I don't know if it's on purpose. Maybe indoctrination is too hard word. It's just a limitation in being able to communicate. For a long time, we've been told that my subjective experience isn't valid, and until it can be proven empirically through third person and repeatable, that it doesn't exist. I think that isn't true. Well, I believe, I know that's not true. My first person experience is just as important as the third person rule. And I guess that's what Socrates said about, an unquestioned life is not worth living in the first person experience.
That's interesting. I've been reading up, to be honest, watching and listening more about Sikh philosophy recently, and really understanding how Advait it is, how aligned with a lot of the Advaita philosophy that you've studied is not just
Yeah,
aligned, it is essentially, that is essentially
really.
what it is. Yeah. And there's a concept, I was just talking to Ola about this morning, that there's this concept of really being in two states of attention. One where you have your attention to God, and in Sikhi it's called Gurmukh, where your attention is on the Guru, which in Sikhism can be interpreted as really your attention on the divine, on everything that is divine, the universe, the source. Various people call it by different things, and or simply just God. And the other is Manmukh, which is your attention is on yourself. And we always think of it as, in English at least, we think of words like selfish or self-absorbed, but really it's much more simple than that. It's the I, right? As Ramana Maharishi would say, right? The focus on the I, and who is the I that I am. That trying to dissolve that is so much a big part of non-duality. But yeah, trying to reconcile that, relinquishing that focus from self to having your attention on the divine at all times as an aspiration, reconciling that with philosophy
Human
like
rights.
Socrates, and well, not just that, but
All
even
right.
like Kierkegaard and Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Like, can you imagine Descartes having a conversation with Ramana Maharishi?
Ramana Maharshi. He'd hand it to him in a
I think,
in a
therefore I
heartbeat.
am. But who is the I that thinks? That is the...
He was the one that is cognizant, conscious of the thought. So I'm conscious that we've gone. I'm conscious that we've gone into the spiritual realm all of a sudden, and it doesn't have to be. But I think, as a result of the great pause, the great reset, whatever you want to call it, the blanket's been, or the rug's been pulled out of everyone's feet, and what I'm seeing, I'm just reporting here. What I'm seeing is kind of two worlds. There's the people. We're all going through some level of grief, the 5 or the 7 stages of grief. Some of us are still in anger and not wanting to give up. We go into bargaining, and then we go into some level of acceptance, and whatnot. My question is, who's the one doing all that? In the first person experience, it's the thought. In the third person experience, it's someone who's got rights and has property and is someone and is all these other things.
Like the head of Illuminati, you mean, like that?
No, I wasn't going there. No. Just like, my license says that I am an individual, my certificate, blah, blah, blah. Let's call this, like, all these things in the first person experience are third party pieces of paper.
Right. Having the sovereign individual. And who gives you that sovereignty? It's the,
I'm trying really hard.
The state is giving you the sovereignty, but we complain about the state taking away our individuality.
Yeah, but there is no. It's impossible for that to happen. It's totally impossible for that to happen. No vaccine will ever take that away from you. We're infinite beings. From my 0 point perspective, from where I'm looking from now, and I'm not doing special, everyone has this right. It's the absolute right. From my 0 point perspective, my face right now in the first person experience is out there in the screen. It's not here. This is space for this time and space, and you out there, and my face out there, and technology out there. Right now, right here, right now. It's where the illusion of all these things that we're seeking for, about the challenge of trying to be right, wanting to be right, can be burst. Those bubbles can be burst. Because you just check it, it's right here. Now, we can have glimpses of these things, and I'm pretty addicted to lots of different modalities around learning how to glimpse these states. But I'm now like really getting into the progressive path, which is really hardwiring the brain to a point, retraining the brain to a point where it's always in this destination which the glimpses take me to. And all I have is compassion for everything and everyone, and everything. So this is related to not wanting to be right. Everything's already perfect in a choiceless ground of awareness. And it's not until we believe our thought, feelings, and sensations that we start to want to be right. Duality. If there's right, there must be wrong. But if this is right and this is wrong, who is the one observing? That's the infinite.
Yeah, this has been something that I've struggled with a lot throughout my life in various contexts. Growing up in a, not that I grew up in a very religious family or anything, but nonetheless, I've been very curious my whole life about different spiritual practices, religious traditions, and growing up in a Sikh household and Sikh tradition, generally speaking, looking into that, there's this concept of the spiritual non-duality side, which is about acceptance and surrender to God's will. And then there's this very strong part of Sikh tradition, which is you have an ethical and moral responsibility to fight against oppression. And
right.
I've often wondered, how do you... And, we talk about it in Sikhism, there's a concept of saint-soldier. In other traditions, there's this concept of warrior saints. One of my favorite books, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, by Dan Millman, he talks about this idea of the path of the peaceful warrior. And it sounds like a paradox. I guess it kind of is, and maybe that's okay. But yeah, how do you reconcile in this day and age?
No, we're actually that's really interesting. We're actually doing that right now.
Oh yeah, how so? And what is it that we're doing right now?
We're willing to have this conversation publicly.
Yeah,
that flies totally in the face of the collective understanding. In this case, that you need to be right and have rights.
So how do you fight oppression without being right about?
How do you fight
oppression, for example?
Oppression.
Without being right, oppression. Whether it's whatever. Actually, it doesn't even matter the context. It's just, how do you fight oppression without being right that you are the fighter and the person you're fighting or the system or the institution that you're fighting is the oppressor?
So this is exactly where this saint soldier has to step up, right here, because I can feel.
Sorry, the what has to step up?
The saint
soldier, right?
The white warrior soldier, whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
Warrior monk. No, it's not really monk. Warrior, yeah, saint. Because I feel it in my body going, ooh, yeah, I can feel. I know where it is, but then at the same time, I've got another part of me, my conditioned part, going, yeah, you're going to trigger some people. Here's the thing: even in my bodily dimension, there are multiple dimensions. So there's my personality wanting to oppress the truth in my body. In my experience, from a somatic perspective, the body never lies, and the body keeps a score. In my mind, it's trying to kind of go, just do the right thing, do the right thing. So if I can just, if people can be able to hold opposing views equally and have space for it, then there will be less trigger and people can sort of just have more freedom. And this is about just our expression, really, at the end of the day. So I'm just going to not worry too much about that. It's an opportunity to express my multiple point of views, our multiple points of views, and explore. And again, we're not trying to be right here.
No, we're trying not to be right.
We're trying not to be right. We're not trying to be right. We're trying not to be right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it the same thing?
I think one's active and
There
one's
is,
passive. If you're trying,
yeah.
if you're not trying to
Oh,
be
okay.
right, you're not doing something. But we're actively trying not to get
We're
caught up in
actively
the.
trying not to be caught up in being right,
Yeah.
which is a personality-based construct. All right. It's all about, overcoming collective trauma, societal pressures, all of these susceptible things. That is just conditioned. It's just conditioned. There's nothing oppressive. It's just conditioned. It's the best that we can do with what we know,
Yeah.
historically, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying there's some big conspiracy or anything like that. It's just the ordinary mind. That's all
It's the human
that's all it
experience.
can do. It's a human experience, and it's just chasing thought, creating thought, and looking for problems to get another dopamine hit to go, look how good I am, and I'm right. It's just a thought. It's even more paper thin than paper. And maybe we're chasing this non-rightness for the purposes of liberation, trying to be right. Ooh. So my body will say there is no oppression. No one's being oppressed. And that's going to cause some triggers from people. But in your first person experience, other than what you're thinking and believing, everything's okay. Even when you feel that you're oppressed.
So we don't have a lot of viewers right now in the live stream, but this is going to be recorded, and I'm sure people will watch this later. And I reckon a lot of people that will watch this will think about oppression in the sense of the government's oppressing with lockdowns and whatever. So let's skip all of that. Let's go straight to Afghanistan right now.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
It's happening. Is it happening?
It's happening.
Is it?
Isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, it's happening. If it's happening, it must be okay.
So we shouldn't do anything about it?
Oh, we should, because people are suffering. But I don't know who's oppressing who. I mean, I'm not going to make any opinions politically or anything like that, but I really, when we buy into the collective idea that our thoughts are governing everything and what knows, we're just going to have more of this suffering. We're just going to have more of this dimension of oppression. I mean, how many people in World War II became awakened in the harshest of conditions because their separate sense of self, that small self, had no other choice but to give up because it saw so much, stuff that they weren't prepared for. And it ended up giving way. And then they discovered that, oh, shit, everything I've been looking for is already here. I've just been looking in the wrong direction. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you said about Sufism. I was listening to a podcast of a...
Sufism or Sikhism?
Sikhism, yeah. So I was listening to a podcast about Sufism of a really quite accomplished Sufi out of Germany. Very impressive. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know much of it. Don't know much about that path. And but he went through the different stages, and I went, oh yeah, man, they're all going to the same place. So religions are basically a human interpretation, a conceptual interpretation of our way and the way and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, they're all just different. It's like language. There's different languages and different geographies, and that's all it is. Unfortunately, they also play the game of, but we're the only way to liberation and all that kind of stuff. And put in middlemen in between, and to turn it into an human organization, and that's okay. part of me doesn't like that, and I can see that as being oppression because it's misleading.
If you're right about that.
And if I was right about that, I was
Mm.
right about that. In my experience, I'm right about that, but I'm not saying it's anyone else's experience. And so maybe that's the way out. Maybe that's, in my experience, I'm right. But there are many other rightness. There are many other perspectives at the same time. Right as we speak right here, right now, as I see you and we make all these assumptions around what we're doing and what's in front of us, someone else could be sitting right next to me and having a totally different experience.
Mm.
And so allowing for that then allows you to abide in a state of being suspicious of your own thinking, which is one way to execute.
I don't know why this is coming to me
Socrates.
right now. I just had a flashback to a movie I watched a long time. Can't remember what movie it was. But there was a scene where a doctor was sitting with a patient who was experiencing schizophrenia. It might have been A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. I can't remember. It might have been an Indian movie. I have no idea. And they were having a conversation about what's objective reality and what is the reality that is presented in schizophrenia to people who have hallucinations. And he said, look, if I see something, if I see that table over there, I can go ask everyone in this room to tell me if they see the table there as well. And they will. They might see different textures of it or different, the colors and shades might be a little bit different. But everybody can look at it and say, yeah, there's a table there. But if I see a person sitting on that table and nobody else sees that person sitting there, then chances are you're hallucinating.
Yeah. According to whose perspective?
No, but there's
For too long, we've locked people up in psych wards, right?
Yeah, but I think the
because
point
because
is that
it's dysfunctional in society.
Yeah, but it's not just
From
dysfunctional
first
to
system.
society. It's dysfunctional to the person.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's different gradients. Well,
There are, but I've seen some extremes. Having worked in and around the medical profession, I know that there are people who hallucinate something and that something tells them to kill themselves. What are you supposed to do with that? It's their experience, so let them kill themselves.
that's a really good one. You really want to open up that can of worms?
Yeah, man, totally. Who's right in that
Okay.
situation? The person who's having that experience, because all experience is
No,
subjective.
I mean, I used to. Yeah, this is very. What I'm. Now I'm seeing this saint warrior. Really, there's no one here. There's no one here. There's only awareness. You can't kill awareness. Awareness can't die. Everything else is a story. So this whole thing about, you can't let that person kill themselves. Well, how do you know that's not the best thing that they can for them? Recently I used to have the thought that, no, suicide is a bad thing. But I mean, stepping in and taking, this is what I'm saying. This stuff can be really out there if you're coming from the ordinary mind. And depending on what you believe in, one of my teachers basically goes, I did a past life regression. I recognized that I was rowing in a boat, and I could have just killed myself and just, be jettisoned into life, and that would have been okay. I don't like this life. Let's get out of it. Bang. And then you just get reincarnated in another life if you believe in it. It doesn't actually matter if you believe it or not, because that's an idea. It happens. Energy can't be destroyed. And that's in my experience. It's only my opinion. I'm not saying it's right. But if we're infinite beings in this first-person experience, then I can cancel any self-limiting beliefs that have been imposed on me that have actually conditioned my view of the world. And so if someone wants to, that's a big assumption. I know. I studied social work, and I've been in psych wards. I've seen people who were in exactly that, and
Yeah,
I've
you were a
seen
social worker, right?
electroconvulsive therapy. Yeah, I've
Mm,
seen ECT. I've seen all that kind of stuff. And back then, I was so naive.
mm,
Um, but there was still something inside me that kind of was seeking the truth, and I went up against this the clinical psychologists who were giving out all the drugs willy nilly and all that kind of stuff. And I said, why don't we just have a conversation with these people? Like, hello,
mm.
you know. Um, I mean, it's not that simple, but we take life to be so serious, including our rights, and we totally miss the 99.9% of the rest of our life. What's here right now? And to try and keep it as simple as I can, and this is not going to be simple, is we don't even pay attention to ether, space, the void. Right here, the space between the screen and me right now is not nothing. In fact, I reckon that in 1 cubic meter, I saw something yesterday in a documentary, 1 cubic meter of space, there's more power there's so much power in that cubic meter of space. And
What do you mean power? Power
listen,
in the physics sense, or
yeah, from a physics perspective,
like
yeah,
potential energy?
like the potential energy, yeah. I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember what they said. Like they equated it to something. I'm not sure what it was exactly. I'm not sure if it was a nuclear weapon or something, but it would have been silly. But in my experience, it's the total opposite of everything we've been told, trained, educated, where bliss, happiness, joy, love, timelessness, spaciousness exist. And it and we and I get it from my own experience with lots of diligence. What I've discovered is when I want to be right about something, I basically close all other options off. And then the only one that I'm actually satisfying is my small, ordinary mind, which is
Mm.
nothing other. If you want to go here, I mean, they've proven it many times over. It's nothing other than a thought when we were 1 or 2 years old, where our parents, were giving us something and saying, "Dev, this is yours. This is yours, Dev. This is yours." And you go, "Mine, mine." And then at some point, you looked in the mirror and you saw the image of yourself, and you went, "Me." And then all of a sudden, you started to believe that you were the way, your certain characteristics of the way you looked. And then what happens is these little thoughts go, "Me, mine," and then you go into problems. We're trained to problem solve before the age of 5, right? Blocks and squares and puzzles and maths and science and English and be a man, have a household, bring up kids, all that stuff. Problem solving, right? And that reiterates this separate sense of self, because the problem solve the separate sense of self looks for problems to solve to validate that it exists.
What's wrong with that?
And then it's actually not. It's not who you truly are, and it clouds and it clouds. And so what's wrong with that? Consumerism, never-ending consumption and creation for benefit, for another dopamine hit. When all you got to do, I'll just fall into righteousness. Let me just slow down a bit. Try not to be right. In my experience, it's literally about turning awareness around back onto itself and learning how to do that, to recognize that, oh shit, everything I've always wanted, needed, desired for is already here. Yeah. And so, and what they've discovered is that there are 3 or 4 or 5 parts of the brain, medial prefrontal cortex and parietal lobes, which when we go into daydream mode, which we spend 47% of our life our day in our life, it triggers the default mode network, which was accidentally discovered about 10, 15 years ago in a neuroscience lab. And so, and that, and it's just this like rumination. Oh, I wonder why Dev didn't ask me that question today. And what am I gonna? Everything is me, I, right? Just continues to distract us from what's already here, and that we're the unbound wholeness in first-person experience. And this relates to rights, because the one who's concerned about giving up their rights is this separate sense of self, because there's no one to give up anything. And then, one of my Muji, another teacher, says, you don't have any rights. There's no rights. Give up your addiction to rights, and you will find everything that you thought you were going to get by having those rights. It's hard to hear, I know.
It is. The things that immediately come to my mind are that's probably the most fundamentally abused philosophy by cult leaders, who tell people to give up their rights, and then they just take all of those rights for themselves. And you end up with spiritual gurus who own several Rolls Royces and mansions and real estate, and they pretend to be pious and not of the world.
Yeah, true. That has happened, absolutely.
It's happened
but it's
a lot,
not happening.
man. It's happened a lot.
It has happened. Happened a lot.
I map this to entrepreneurship, in the sense that you hear of, like, when you think of the word entrepreneur, what most people, as in majority of the population, think of is Silicon Valley, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, entrepreneurs. But they're actually a minority of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? Most entrepreneurs are not working at that scale. Most entrepreneurs who are successful entrepreneurs are not famous. They're doing their thing, and they have their own success in their small communities. It's like that in the world of spiritual gurus, quote unquote. There are so many villages, and I've seen this firsthand. I've seen it personally in India, where I've gone to a couple of small villages, and I've seen these people there personally. I won't get into the stories right now, but they'll rock up in their super expensive cars. Everyone from the village will gather around them, touch their feet.
Wow.
They'll be like, bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you. Give me your money, 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 money. And they'll go away. And that's their business.
Yeah.
There's dozens of them all over the world.
Yeah. So,
so in the interest of trying not to be right about this, because I'm falling into that now, right?
No. Hold.
Okay.
Get back to the first person experience. So one tries to enforce their sovereignty onto me and say that I know better than you, or I'm special, and you need to bow down to me. Yeah, okay. So I can see how by me saying you have no rights, and me being and someone, and the stories of gurus playing a role here, but it's not what I'm referring to. You are an infinite being, and you decide what you want to do. No one can take your rights away around that. We're addicted to all these other rights, or wanting to be right, and and now I say that, and I actually hear in the back of my voice, how do you know that those people don't actually? It's not their path.
They don't get some value from giving their rights to someone else,
or even if they don't get any value from giving out their rights.
It just is what it is.
Well, for them in particular, this is the whole spectral, like that whole multidimensional existence of one person's giving up their rights and getting taken advantage of, from my perspective, by a guru or by a government or by whatever, Pfizer. How do you know that's not good for them? How do you know that their oppression, from my perspective, is not good for them? Because at some point they're going to learn the lesson, or not yet.
Or Afghani locals being oppressed by Taliban, or Jews in World War II.
At the gross level, it looks bad, right?
Yeah.
But I know
it looks
that,
bad.
I mean, we need to transcend duality, and that means transcending samsara and nirvana. In other words, bliss, joy, and suffering. Some people go, what? There's another realm? How? What? Yeah.
No, I don't think between us, like, I'm not really thinking about people watching this or anything, or just conversation between you and I. To us, that's a foundational concept anyway. We understand that there's this third realm of acceptance where it's beyond good and evil, and there is no concept of right or wrong.
And everything is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's perfect. Choiceless.
But exactly. The question I have is still what I asked earlier, which is, how do you reconcile that with concepts of suffering in the face of evil, for example? You've talked about this before with me, about demons and evil projections and people throwing their negative energy onto you, even from the other side of the world, and causing distress and whatnot. How do you reconcile this third realm of acceptance, which everything is beyond good and evil and there is no right or wrong, with that there are people who hurt other people, and that is not nice? And should those people be stopped? Nice. Is there a place for lawmakers? Is there a place for ethical philosophers? Is there a place for governance in spirituality?
If I'm talking just to you, there is no independently self-existing evil.
I'm sorry, the last word you dropped out a little bit.
If I'm just talking to you, I would say there's no independently self-existing evil or good. There is just a loving source, and that doesn't even come close. That doesn't even come close. There is no word. You can't describe it. And yes, we have discussed this before in terms of evil and being attacked and this and that. I was totally complicit in that because I bought into the idea that was a possibility, and therefore I bought into the self-limiting belief that that can happen, and manifested it. Gave him the power until I seriously went to the next level and really scrutinized and inquired into it, and could not be found. No independent existence of it. And this is what I'm saying, is that there are multiple dimensions. Yeah, you can believe in this. You can believe in all of these middle realms and good and evil, and but I think it's important to know that the ultimate, the absolute, is choiceless, and that the latest thing that has been working for me as well, and I'm in such a really profound way, is that at some level, when I was not in this body, chose to be in this body at this time, knowing full well what was going to happen. I chose it. For a long time, I used to do the total opposite of that. And it was painful, and I kind of read something somewhere, and it just clicked through, and I went,
what's the total opposite?
Total opposite is, why the hell am I back here again? What have I done? I must have done something bad before, blah, blah, blah. No, but then I heard conversations with God. And he said, what if it was like you actually chose it, knowing full well exactly what was going to happen, but that you wanted to experience it again? And this time have the opportunity to kind of do it differently, or see it differently, experience it differently. Same experience, different view. The view is the meditation, as the Tibetans say. And that changed everything for me, because it went from being, oh, why am I putting up with all these 5 things, to, and like the pushing away of that, the reactivity of that, to, oh, if I've chosen to be in this realm and I'm experiencing these 5 things as an example, now I'm curious. Why? What could I do differently? If I chose to be here for it, what is the lesson that I can learn from these things? And it totally transforms all suffering. Because now I'm curious. What's the lesson here?
That's really interesting. Something I've thought about a little bit, recently is, there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. I've started thinking that the teacher's always there.
The teacher's always there. Always there.
Teacher doesn't need to show up. Teacher's always there. When the student's ready, they'll finally take the lesson.
Yeah. And look at the definition of a student. What is it? Yeah.
No, it's okay. Go on.
That's beautiful. I mean, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a student?
Go on.
No, I'm asking you.
I don't have a definition answer to that question, because a lot of concepts come to my mind, and I'm trying not to be right. But what comes to my mind?
Context. I like it.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice little stick to whip us back in check.
Yeah.
What we talked about last time.
No, but for you, what in your experience, what are the characteristics for you? What are the characteristics of when you were a student? When you are
a student? That's a great question. And funny enough, exactly what I was going to say also responds to that, probably better anyway, which is, I think about our last conversation about the problem being right, rooted in judgment, and the antidote to judgment being curiosity. And I think that's the characteristics of student. It's wanting to perpetually be in a state of learning, which actually means being perpetually in a state of openness to what is. Yeah. And that can only come from, you can only really be an infinite student, if you will. I just made that word up. An infinite student, if you're willing to be a student of infinity, which means you're consistently striving to let go of notions of right and wrong. Because there's always something to learn. And as you said, I think you were talking about it more in a cosmic sense of perhaps where, at least that's how I heard it. That's how it came into my deeper listening, that, why am I suffering this again in this life? Sometimes I think people carry generational trauma, and there's a spiritual level to that, which is that they come into the life, and maybe their life purpose or their karma, we can go into that as a topic as well, is simply suffering. They're just miserable. And when I was a kid, there was this concept thrown around. This is it's a little part of some sect of Hindu philosophy that has been popularized across India, which is that your karma comes with you through incarnation. And if you're suffering now, it means that, and this is how it's simplified to children, right? That if you're suffering now, it's probably because you did something naughty in your past life. And if you keep doing naughty stuff, you'll suffer in your next life. Hugely oversimplistic. That's not actually what the
and terrible.
religious traditions
say. It's like the boogeyman.
it's like a stick and carrot to get kids to behave.
Yeah.
That's all it is, really. There's obviously there's a
But it's
level
interesting
of
when you look at epigenetics. It's
yeah.
interesting when you look at
Hold it though, because we'll come to that. I'll transition into that. It'll be really interesting to talk about. So I think with the teacher thing, sorry, the student thing is that you would sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. You were talking about, or at least how I heard it, at a cosmic level, we come into this life, we're suffering, and we go, oh shit, why am I going through this experience of this drag, this chain, grind again? Haven't I learned my lesson by now? And then you kind of shrink it down to a macro level, but within this life, where maybe you're going from a bad habit that you think you've learned your lesson from, let's say a toxic relationship, is a classic example, and then you just end up in another toxic relationship. And you're like, how did I end up here again? Didn't I learn my lesson from the last toxic relationship not to end up in toxic relationships? You can actually shrink that down even more into more of a microcosm and say, in this moment, I'm getting angry, or I'm getting self-centered, or I'm getting lustful or greedy, or egotistic. Essentially, it's all egotistic, all of these things and concepts. Why haven't I learnt? I've learnt this lesson before. I had a conversation with my friend Constantine, and I learnt that I shouldn't experience these because it keeps me in an ego state. But what you said was really interesting, that there's, maybe those lessons come again and again and again because we keep evolving different ways to view them. And that's what came to my mind as you said, the view is the meditation. So it's not about the student being ready and the teacher showing up. It's that the student is ready for a particular lesson. So the student will, at that point in time, listen to that aspect of the lesson that the teacher is always sharing, always present. And then you might have to hear it again and just be able to view it from a different angle. And again and again and again. And then you could say, how does that influence your epigenetics? What does that mean for generational trauma, where we feel where we're suffering, but it's actually we're carrying someone else's karma up the line?
Yeah.
So what came to your mind about epigenetics when you were...
I think epigenetics is karma related in some way. We didn't have the knowledge back then, or the science back then in Hinduism. There's karma in Buddhism as well. But karma is a very interesting thing. I've been interested in that because I've had a lot of repeating of stuff, of inverted commas suffering. And my current view on this is only my view, and it's from direct experience. So it's not an opinion. How do I say it? It's not a conceptual opinion. It's a direct experience opinion. Is that from the ordinary mind and small sense self personality, you're going to have a lot of karma because it's a construct. It doesn't independently exist. And so the way to overcome really quickly a lot of karma, or not overcome, but to learn from the karma, is to not be that independent self, that dependent person, that personality. Constantine is a man, and he has to do these things and has these kind of personality traits. All concepts. Those things are all concepts. This is tightly connected to rights, being right, mainly being right. But when you shift into what's aware of Constantine, then what changes is the view, and the view is otherwise known as like the way you know, the way you perceive, and who you are totally changes and shifts. And to realize that it's not something you have to earn, it's not something you need to be certified in, it's not something that someone else needs to validate you in, approve of. It's not something that requires, look, it requires a lot of work only because of the developmental model of us being trained innocently. I don't want to make it sound like there's a conspiracy here. Just innocently trained in operating out of one way in our lives. And then, that's why I think in Indian culture, you grow up, you have a family, you bring them up, you marry them off, and then when they're married off, you can leave your wife and go and be a yogi. Is that true? Like after a certain age,
I think saying
50,
Indian culture is a big generalization. Generally, Indian culture.
I'm sorry, that's the limit
in some
of my
some Asian cultures, I would say.
Is it?
Yeah,
Asian?
in some. Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that idea. Another way.
What idea?
Of,
which part of it?
I love the idea is you get to a certain point and then you can become a hermit and really find who you truly are. I mean, it's a little bit us about face, because then basically what you're doing is you're training a world to be conditioned into a small sense of self.
Yeah, no,
and
you're
then you're going
right.
off and finding bliss.
Yeah. So no, I think this is something that's rooted in certain Hindu cultures. I'm not even using the word religion or spirituality here. It's really a cultural thing that's evolved, which is that you live life in certain stages. So there's a householder stage, there's a spiritual stage which comes later in your life, there's an ascetic stage where you sort of retrieve from the world. But yeah, it's not, I wouldn't call it Indian culture. India's massive, man, as you know.
Yeah, apologize. Didn't mean to offend.
Oh,
it's the
no need
limit
to
of
apologize.
And the benefit of not wanting to have to always be right.
No, it's, to be honest with you,
allow
I feel
people to take some risks.
You know what triggers me a little bit about it is it's actually not the generalization thing. It's actually kind of a retrospective FOMO. I feel like sometimes I wish that I had that level of discipline in my life, because those stages can be really helpful. Mm-hmm. They might not be right. They might not be the most, like you said, it seems like it can be a bit backwards. But they can be very helpful. But if the
society supports it, it's amazing.
Well, that's it. That's the idea, right? That everyone in a society where it takes a village to raise a kid, mm-hmm. that in this period of your life, you don't have to worry about the other stuff that might come into your mind. You just focus on your studies. You just focus on your marriage. You just focus on your children. Obviously you can focus on other things, but that's your primary, you have a primary focus that not only are you told that that's your primary focus, but as you said, you're supported to focus on that primary focus. I felt like growing up, I had to focus on so many things because I was very, very lost and perhaps innately very curious and philosophical. But there was a period of time in my life where I was, like, my primary focus was education, relationships, spirituality, personal development, fitness, money to a lesser extent, but, some sense of financial. And it was all in a very compressed period of time. And I just ended up being not very good at any of those things.
That's right. Yeah. Like the old tribe cultures, they had certain roles that were supported by the tribe. They didn't have to go out and fend, the healers, the chiefs or whatever it might be. We don't have that today. If it's dog eat dog world in terms of the old model, it's all just been broken down. All that, I just think that all that's all being, there's an opportunity for it to be reviewed. Let me just say that. put it that way. Anyway,
Hmm.
because not everyone is ready in this lifetime to dedicate what is required to access and be a fountain of divinity for a community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. I often jokingly in my head think, wouldn't it be cool if religion was more agile? In the sense of, agile project software development, agile project management, in the sense that you'd have these religious institutions get together for sprint reviews and retrospectives and say, all right, what's been working well in our with our product and our releases?
Yeah.
What can we do better? And instead, it's almost the exact opposite, where everything is about holding on to ancient traditions, and that word ancient gives so much gravitas to tradition and culture. Oh, these traditions are ancient. It must mean that they're all the more credible because they're rooted in
there's
ancient
an assumption
philosophy.
underneath it. Yeah.
It's an assumption, but it's also like an energy attached to that word, associated with mystical things. If something is ancient, it has a certain power. We want to explore the ancient pyramids. I think so. I think logically that's probably what it is. That if it's an ancient, but has it actually stood the test of time?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, how much has it been changed? Edited. I have this dialogue with my mum all the time about, the Greek Orthodoxy, and because she's very devout, which is amazing. I love it. But I go, Mum, how do you know these texts weren't tainted in the last 1,000 years? This morning I listened to one of the Gnostic texts. Who was it again? Matthew? Mark? Sorry. Here we go. Where did it go? History.
If you have a swollen prostate.
That's hilarious. These ads are amazing. Yeah, a swollen prostate. Oh, come on. I have to get through that damn commercial. Don't tell me. And it was like I was listening. I was listening to this interpretation. Oh, St. Thomas. Gnostic Gospel of St. Thomas, which was only discovered 50 years ago.
Oh, really?
Apparently. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So it hasn't been tainted, hasn't gone through the big, homogenization.
Wait, what do you mean discovered? Like they discovered how?
I haven't got the detail. Maybe we can talk about it next time. Let me do the research.
No, that's okay. But I just mean in very simple terms, there was an excavation and they discovered some papers, or it was like somebody had a spiritual enlightenment experience and they...
No. It was a book.
Okay. So they physically discovered some writings that
Thomas.
were... Okay.
Gospel of Thomas. Yeah, check it out. Yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't tainted and this and that. And it's very similar to the Bible. But there are some things in there that I literally went, oh, Christ was a non-dual teacher. Oh my gosh. He was he was pointing to Advaita, basically. And when you look at it through a non-dual perspective, after having direct experience of it, it all comes clean. It all becomes clear, very clear. And this is coming from someone who was a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just see it totally differently now. It's really amazing.
I'm surprised it wasn't suppressed, if that was the case, given that...
Well, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago by.
Or maybe that was why it was suppressed. It only was discovered 50 years ago.
Well, I wonder. I don't know how that happened. But I can't remember what we're talking about right now. But what was it again?
Ancient. The word ancient.
Oh, ancient. Yeah, beautiful. Look, I do believe that there are some. Yeah, the word ancient. I'm quite familiar with it because we were playing with it at one of the projects I work on, the Conscious Accelerator, and because I came up with a term to explain when people say, "What do you guys do?" I go, "We have modernized ancient wisdom practices." Oh no, modernized wisdom practices. We don't say ancient in it because wisdom. Well, what does that mean? That's got some cliche as well, right? I think there are some teachings that just stand the test of time and are undeniable because inevitably, if there's like, don't tell the world that they can access the divine without anyone else. Like, come on, we need IP to protect this and a patent and make sure that they pay, $50 a month, all that kind of stuff. Because that breaks the whole system. And I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. It's just why the guru charges whatever he charges to give you a blessing.
Yeah, it's not open source.
It's not, but the reality is that it is open source. It's the most open source that you can ever get. Like right here, right now, all the time, inevitable. It's anyway, it's amazing.
Open source. I just thought of how much you could play on those words.
Wow, yeah, that's true. Totally. Actually, maybe we should play on this. Open, absolutely, because awakened awareness, otherwise known as Source, God, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it sounds hilarious to me. Awake awareness. It just sounds like a very marketing language type of thing. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, true. But it's interesting because I've got a couple of 1,500-year-old texts here that were converted, and that's what they refer to as awake awareness. Awake awareness.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thing about things getting lost in translation, right? How much are we really capturing the essence of something when we translate it into the language that's not the ancient language? True. But anyway, go on.
That's true. Because there are multiple translations of this particular text. It was from 700 AD. Oh.
21 nails. Okay.
From Taparit, who was an amazing yogi in Tibet, and it's exactly as you and I would say. Like, if you're a gymnast and you nail the move, that's exactly what it is. It's the 21 nails of enlightenment. How to nail it.
Maybe next time we catch up, we could,
because they're very practical. They're very practical. It's like, don't believe me. Just don't believe me.
Try it.
Like, no faith, nothing. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to point, and you just look where I'm pointing, and then you tell me if you don't find it. Which is what the Buddha said. Buddha said, "Come into the water. I don't care. I don't care if you believe me or not. Just come into the water. If you don't like it, and get out. It's fine." So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And the Indo-Tibetans, I don't know, probably per capita had the most awakened people in one time. Like that, the history of their culture and how Buddhism went in there and the integration of Bon and Buddhism was pretty interesting, pretty amazing. But more importantly, apart from talking about stories and ancient texts, it's really about the effectiveness of these pointings. And what they're pointing to is exactly what they're promising. And when you find it, you go, wow, my first-person direct experience of reality becomes so brilliant with no psychedelics, with no special breathing, with like just certain pointings. And because you haven't been directed in how you can turn your awareness around into ways that you've never been shown, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means you haven't explored it. That's all. Anyway, but coming back to not being right. Ancient pyramids is probably a bad example. I mean, those things have stood the test of time. That's pretty amazing. Come on. mean,
Oh no, they are. But what I was saying is that people attribute some sort of magic to them. I mean, there's obviously there are also theories which, I don't know if it's true or not, and I don't. I'm not casting any judgment on the theory of it, which is that aliens built the pyramid. So there's this whole narrative that you can follow along that. But my point is that people attribute that if something's ancient, and maybe you're right, it's just about standing the test of time, there must be some supernatural magic to it, some supernatural credibility to it.
Mysticism.
Yeah, because it's so old.
And it stood the test of time?
I don't know if it stood the test of time. I mean, and look, to be honest with you, I felt
is there a bias? Is there a bias towards the more older it is, the more mystical it is? Is that what you're meaning? There must be because this is this is a really good point here, right? Because this is about trying not to be right. Like we're basically let's inquire directly, purely into what cachet does ancient have for you?
Look, I'll tell you my personal experience with this potential bias. When I went to, I traveled for the first time, like proper traveled for the first time, quite late in my life compared to some other people. And I think in my mid-20s I was already. And what that meant for me was that I had a lot of romanticism about traveling to other places already built up before I went there. So when I went to these really old places and I went to India a few times growing up, but when I went to India, I actually traveled by myself to certain places, but especially when I went to Europe and Eastern Europe and Central Europe and really old castles and things like that, I had this fantasy of, if only I could find one of those old antique stores where I would meet some old lady that would give me some potion or some trinket, and it would have some magical power. Yeah. I used to think about these stories in my head, and somehow Australia, or at least Sydney, just feels so modern and concrete, and like it doesn't have that power to it. So I think there's a general notion, a general vibe that people have with things that are older, but then there's this projection and an escalation of that, where you think if something's super old, it must be there must be some more power to the mysticism of it, and I think that goes for religions and things. So the reason we started talking about this was because I was saying, I sometimes jokingly think, wouldn't it be cool if religious committees and institutions were agile and they would regularly retrospect and say, are we actually responding to changing requirements, right? Like the fundamentally agile philosophy.
How do you measure effect?
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. But how do you measure effectiveness?
And how do you measure how do you measure requirements? Even?
How do you measure requirements and what you actually deployed? Has that been accepted as being effective? That would be really interesting. That would be really interesting. Because then I don't know, I have an affinity for pointings. Right? I just don't tell me, don't preach, don't try and tell me, to have faith or anything like that. Just show me. In other words, proof. I can feel another challenge coming up. My mind's going, well, that's what everyone else is asking. And I'm saying, well, like this, thanks to, suffering has been such a beautiful teacher to me. Suffering is my ally, but only when I recognize it as an ally. When you saw suffering as something that I can deny, distract, delay, all the D's, it just keeps coming back. That's karma. It just keeps coming back. You haven't learned the lesson, and you think no one's going to find out, and whatever, But when you actually, at some point, I don't know when. I don't know. I don't know if there's a science for it, but at some point you turn around towards it and you go. And I think a lot of it has to do with grace. A lot of it has to do with finding teachers. A lot of it has to do with. I have so many people to thank. Like, man, I had a life coach who was more than just a life coach for about 8 to 10 years, and she slowly unpeeled the onion. And I recognized how damaged I was. Yeah, let me define that, because that's changed now. Not damaged, how much my thinking was damaged, how my perspectives were damaging. Let's just say that. That when it came time to like really double down and go on retreat and go on, really do the like serious work after my exit 2012, just a lot of work. I had full on physical, undeniable shifts in my reality and experiences and waves of bliss, and for no reason all the time, stuff like that, and I'm going, what? And so, because my pursuit became one of avoiding suffering for no reason all the time to finding joy, bliss, happiness all the time. And you may go, oh, is that what the purpose of life is? I go, no, it's a byproduct. It's just what happens when you're in the unbound wholeness, and you're okay with not having any rights. And if someone is trying to oppress me, then I can see that I can have compassion for them and see that they're caught up in a distorted reality distortion field. That whatever they're doing to me is worthwhile, and but I think that these times are. I don't know. Since the pandemic, my close circle of 7 to 10 people has totally changed. The people I didn't know. I did not know who they were in February last year. And now we're so tight. I've never met them. We're all online. Some of them are my teachers. Some of them have become one healers in that period. Not from nothing to, so there's something going on. I don't know. I don't. And it could be because we're, disciplined, devoted to learning, calling our own bluff, dropping the need to be right. There's a part of me that kind of thinks it's something to do with something else as well. I don't know. Someone said that our planet, our solar system is going through part of the galaxy that's got high frequencies associated with Aquarius and so there's a higher frequency available for those people who want to go there, a unity frequency. And to come back to what you were saying about mysticism, I'm seeing a lot of mystical stuff going on. And if we're caught up and distracted by wanting to be right, sharing to the world that I'm right and you're wrong, and this is just, and believing all sorts of stories from all sorts of different people, and sharing shit on all the social platforms, you're not gonna see it. You won't see it. That's what I talked about right at the beginning. That there's two worlds.
So how do you make informed choice if we're not right? How do we choose between a red pill and a blue pill?
Instinct. Trust your gut. Remember because the brain is it's not the only sense of mind here. There's also got the heart and the belly. So integrating the heart. That's what I've learnt.
So I have
especially as men. Hold on, let me just say, especially as men, because we're so like stuck up here.
Yeah.
Being the problem solver.
Oh, I think increasingly women are also. It's a masculine energy. You could argue, but I see it in. I see it in all genders, very much so these days.
Totally. Especially with lockdown, when we're kind of locked down and consuming. The only thing we're doing is really consuming stuff through this information processing system.
I've had to work a lot harder.
There are alternatives.
to combat that myself. I mean, there are alternatives, you were saying? To what?
There are alternatives, choosing to have conversations like this. I mean, how often do we honestly have deep, free, willy conversations about things that we don't know much about, we'd like to explore, share, being safe and open and vulnerable about certain things, so that we can find, because otherwise it's too easy to fall into the cognitive condition pattern of, how are you? Good. Yeah, I'm good as well. Yeah, are you good? Yeah, everything's good. What else have you got? Yeah, no worries. What are you watching on Netflix? Yeah, I'm watching this on Netflix. All right, cool. Maybe we'll talk about it later. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it on the lockdown stand. Yeah, no worries. Right, bye.
Yep.
Come on. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do that. We've got the technology. We can do that. This is an opportunity for us to open our hearts. That's what's on the other side of trying not to be right.
I get a lot of self-awareness out of this conversation, and I noticed this last time we talked and we came up with this idea of having this conversation, and I'm sure it'll keep happening, which is that this kind of conversation forces me to notice when I have this energy of wanting to be right about something or needing to be right about something. The thing I've noticed today in this conversation is this energy keeps coming up to say, what's the point of this conversation? There needs to be some structure. Maybe there's a little bit of an added element as well, because it's being live streamed and recorded. Therefore, I know there's going to be an audience, and therefore there needs to be a purpose. There needs to be some sort of a table of contents, even if it's retrospective. There needs to be some sort of a lesson. That's something I've noticed a lot as a result of, I think, being online, but also being at work, like just being a servant leader of sorts. There's this kind of restlessness that bubbles up in me to say, I need to be creating or providing value to people. And because I think of this medium, it means it has to be through words and intellect, and rather than just the experience. Because you can't just it's weird. You can't just sit with someone, right, on a call and not say anything. I've done that a few times now recently, and I've realized there's heaps of value in it.
I was about to say, is that true?
I don't think so. Not at all. It's not true. But collectively, people, if you're at work, you should be, and we're knowledge workers, so we should be knowledging.
Yeah. That's why we're in the shit we're in. But I love what you just shared. It's wonderful. Reflecting on being able to have a context where we can have these conversations is really important, especially during these times, because it can be very isolating. And as a result, you get caught up in your thoughts, and you get into that whole thing. So the purpose of maybe, and we're discovering it, we don't know. I'd rather be in I don't know mind.
Yeah,
I'd rather be in I don't know mind, that the not knowing that knows. I'd rather be in the not knowing that knows.
Does there even need to be a purpose?
And so the purpose that we're basically looking for is the purpose that we're used to. The purpose that we're opening up here is like the doing of this is its purpose. The space of this is its purpose. Delivering. I'm not doing this for anyone. I'm doing this for you and me. I mean, who would have thunk you could talk for an hour and 40 minutes about not being right?
Instinct, right?
But it's just, don't plan it, don't conceptualize it, don't believe the thoughts about it, and just channel sort of context, opportunity, and then wisdom, whatever, will arise. as long as there's an open heart. If we try to have a be right conversation for the last hour and 40 minutes, look how many times have we spoken over each other? Very little. It'd be different if it wasn't that wasn't the case. Because, to just be trying to get something. I mean, we innocently believe that when we provide value, providing value, that's such, like, prove that you're providing value. That after an hour and 40 minutes, someone will get off the call and go, oh, we'll remember it this time tomorrow, 24 hours later, exactly as we thought we were delivering it. Impossible.
Yeah.
So it's actually bankrupted. That belief is bankrupted.
Recently, I've retrospectively asked myself, what value have I gotten from various bits of wisdom that I've picked up along the way? And I mean very seminal, foundational bits of wisdom that I've picked up through my life. Not much. I don't consider myself very wise. I know that I sound wise, so some people accuse me of being a very wise person, but I don't
sound
think I'm
and
very
look
wise.
wise.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of those two things. But there are little bits of wisdom that I picked up that I give a lot of credit to. One really big one is what I touched on now and what you and I talked about at much more length last time, which was curiosity being the antidote to judgment. And that curiosity being a kind of I forget what that machine's called, but the thing that drills through concrete and ground, the vehicle that you sit in, and it sort of, like a...
It's like it's got a diamond drill face or something.
Yeah.
So are you talking about the one that Tesla, that Elon Musk has created?
Oh, no. It's a very old, common thing. Anyway, whatever. It's like that cuts through the hard sense of right and wrong that fills our ether and sense of existence. Curiosity is the thing that cuts through that. And I was reflecting over the past few weeks of, why do I consider that wisdom? Why do I consider that, like, what's the point of it? And it's very simple. I think it helps me stay calmer under pressure. That's a compliment that people give me, that I will take, because I'm more stoic. And I have been stoic, and if not stoic, then at least resilient in the face of difficulty. I'll just use that word. I'm not going to, that's on a spectrum of something immediately painful and on the other end, something really seriously and complicatedly traumatic. It just helps me stay cool. And because I can stay cool and curious, it helps me stay in some sense of empathy. I won't go so far as to say compassion. I don't know. I'm still figuring out if I'm a compassionate person or not. But I can empathize. And that makes me calm myself down if I feel stressed or anxious, because I have this sense of, it's okay if that person says or does something and they're getting angry or whatever, or my dog's barking at an inappropriate time. It's all right. There's some instinct to it. There's some defense mechanism. There's some intention of trying to keep themselves safe. Or in the case, there's a response that is not rooted in right or wrong or good and evil. There's no malicious intent there. And so the curiosity allows me to just take a breath and just be cool with things unraveling or unfolding or just happening as they are. And that's valuable because it means that I can just be a calmer and more, balanced person, and I don't suffer as often or as much compared to someone who's always losing their shit or getting triggered or living in a state of paranoia.
Getting their way.
Yeah.
Like getting
so
their
for
way.
me, exactly, yeah. And it comes back to trying not to be right. Because of that, I don't have to try so hard to not be right. I just accept that, I'm probably not right. Doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm probably not right either. It's not that relevant to this. And these conversations remind me of that value. These kinds of conversations remind me that I can keep channeling into my self-awareness and realize when that ego is coming up and saying, oh, you need to have a purpose or an outcome or an objective or a structure because you need to be right, because that's going to protect you somehow. But actually the opposite is often true.
Yeah, it shuts you out.
Yeah.
And but that's beautiful ending. Thank you for sharing that. Curiosity is really, that whole beginner's mind thing. Everyone points to it. For some reason we get addicted to wanting to be the smartest person in the room. I mean, come on, just drop it. It's just a bullshit story. I mean, innovation starts with curiosity. I love what you just shared. I love it. It's profound. And I love sharing this with you, brother. Because not everything is what it seems, especially at the beginning of when you hear something or when you see someone, all the psychology and the neuroscience associated with if I posture and change my my facial and this and that, and what happens in your brain, and especially the beginning, the first 3 seconds, is I've totally lost you. You're triggered by a past memory or a past trauma when your dad shouted at you, blah, 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 and I've lost you. So trying to be right has that kind of posturing behind it. And if our society is always posturing about trying to be right, about who to believe around what's happening in the world, versus that's actually taking them away from being curious about what's here now when there's no problem to solve. The ordinary mind can't be at two places at once. So attention, if there's war, that's definitely on our attention. Companies have spent billions on hacking our dopamine receptors, and so really regaining back our sovereignty must start with gaining back our metacognition, which is an awareness of where is my mind going. Is this where I want it to go? And then bringing it back to where it needs to be. And we can train that. We can retrain the brain thanks to neuroplasticity. Mainly to quiet the mind, to allow what's underneath our direct experience to move from the subtle to more obvious. Actually, I started a positive psychology course with Coursera. I shared it yesterday on Facebook, just because it's a good time to be studying during lockdown.
Send it to me. I don't look at Facebook. So.
Okay, it's amazing. It's positive psychology. I realized that I had a bias around what is positive psychology.
Oh, okay.
The first module, I've already gone, bang. Already.
Oh, nice.
First module. So some of the really simple stuff. We have a negativity bias, right? If I say to you, hey, Dev, I've got something to tell you. If I did it like that, you might, because you know me well enough, you kind of go, it might be exciting. But if I go, Dev, I've got something to tell you. I forgot to tell you. You'll go negativity or get all these flashes of memories and all sorts of stuff. What is it? What happened? Something negative. Yeah? Negativity, we have a negativity bias. So we'll default the brain, and that's because of the reptilian part of the brain, fight, flight, freeze. Keep us safe. But human beings have developed the neocortex, which allow us to make decisions and just, override those reactive patterns. When we're in a negative, they've done a lot of studies where they go put someone in a negative state, whatever it might be, anger, fear, or sadness, and you just see this sort of contraction, right? And also our society has been trained to recognize negative states in someone's, from a mirror neuron perspective, from someone's physical expression much easier than when they're in this 10 experiences of positive traits, positive emotions. Now, those there's 10 positive emotions. There's much less negative emotions, but they're so subtle that, or they're so present for, like, even interest is a positive emotion. But when you're always interested, at some point it just becomes like ether. It becomes like space. You forget that it's there, right? We don't take it. We take it for granted until it's gone, right? Maybe we're in depression or whatnot. But not only that. So, firstly, there's 10 of them. The other one is that they're much more subtle, and they're much more available. So we become numb to them. So then the positive psychology so far that I've taken away from this first module, only the first module, is that just like look to notice the value of gratitude. Like look to notice that, oh, I was a lot more interested today than I was yesterday, or just, journaling on this and that, so that you can reiterate to the brain that you were actually in a good mood today. Oh, I was in a good mood today. I didn't realize I was in a good mood today. And that's why I also like Stoicism, because Stoicism does the opposite, kind of negativity. Put yourself in a situation where, imagine how today could be much worse than what it currently is. And you put yourself in there, and I get a call that my child's in hospital with COVID. Shit, that all of a sudden that really makes your current situation come to life. I'm in lockdown. Oh, I'm in lockdown. How could it be worse? It could always be worse. And Stoicism is an ancient practice that has stood the test of time. So I think that's why it's got some value. I don't know if it's right, but it's definitely valuable. But definitely positive psychology. Definitely a look. I'll share it with you. It's on Coursera for anyone who's interested. Yeah, because again, one of my other teachers said, it'd be really good to go back to the beginning and just check out positive psychology and just do this short course. It's free.
To the beginning. That's a that's a big claim on positive psychology. It's not that ancient.
No, just in terms of my path.
I know, I'm just teasing.
Relative to my path, yeah. Because I've actually also done the same thing with concentration. I've gone back to the beginnings. I've got a level 1 retreat coming up with Dan Brown, and
oh, nice.
And I'm going back to like concentration 101, because to get to the next level, concentration is really important to be able to identify beyond thought, conceptualized attention, awareness-based attention, which can pick up, because awareness is 5 times faster than thought. And so you can pick up when a thought arises in your experience. You can pick up, there's a certain, let's say, like if you're in the ocean, there's a certain sucking of, what is it called? Swell. There's a swell before it comes. That only awareness can be aware of it, because it's awareness based. And you can actually see that a thought is arising, and you can do this, what's called internalizing, self-liberating practice, where as it comes up, you realize it's empty, and the thought dies. The wave doesn't build up any momentum to take you, and then you're all of a sudden in a reality distortion field. Actually, and I put this on a ribbon, tied up in a ribbon. That is exactly why I'm talking in multidimensional. There's no absolutes, there's no rights. There is within the perspective, because a thought can take you, or a concept or a bias can take you, and within that bias, yes, there's right and wrong. But if you can enter into self-arising, self-liberating states and never have any thoughts arise, and just be therefore available to what's already here now without any of that, I don't think enough of us spend time there. Maybe in flow when we're in sports, but again, that's task oriented. So there's two states: task mode network, default mode network. Default mode is where self-referencing thought happens to reify this separate sense of self or ego. It's interesting that I just had a reflection that this topic is that we're talking about is, saying how not to, trying not to be right, is actually saying try not to be the ego. And to the ordinary mind, you go, what do you mean? How can you operate without any thought? You can. That is not knowing, that knows. And that is exactly what Ramana was. I was always intrigued by him sort of saying, or maybe it was Papaji saying, just like unhook awareness from thought, drop, open, include, and then surrender to what is. And that this wisdom will just come through you. Decisions will be made. And I went, is that a possibility? Is that really real? And when a couple of months ago I was moving house, I actually had an experience of that for days, 2 weeks actually. I was noticing my body was just moving the house, despite me planning to detail what I was going to do on different days and pack different days because it was a big house and I was on my own and lockdown limitations and this and that. And then I'd just find my body would get up and do whatever it wanted to do. And despite all the planning, what actually eventuated, the outcome was much more successful than what I had planned. By simply just allowing myself to surrender into being. Just need to learn developmentally, just like any other course you want to do or any, childhood education, adult education, just need to learn how to do that. It's nothing mystical. It's already always here. There's no self-improvement program here. You already are the self, capital S self. And if anyone wants to experience that fully, I'm happy to point it out.
Nice.
It's amazing. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
I gotta go, man. But that was, it was nice. Nice talking to you always. We'll have a think about what to chat about next time.
I had an idea.
Yeah.
We could pick the 5 things that we covered today and then expand on them.
Do you remember the 5
Because I
things
think
we covered today?
I'll have to 50 look at
things.
the recording.
Yeah.
Well, I like the 5 core things, let's say, or 6, whatever, and then just expand on that, and then it becomes like a mind map.
Oh yeah.
And then that'll branch out. Because there are some things that I wanted to say today that I kind of forgot halfway through, and then I went, maybe I can pick it up next time, and that's where this idea of.
Or maybe we can draw the mind map and then just do a conversation per branch, per tentacle. That way we can go deeper into something.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Maybe if you draw it, take a photo and send it to me. I'll add to it. Or you can use something like MindMeister.
Yeah, I'll watch the recordings. Really nice. I'll list MindMeister. Yeah, MindMeister.
Sorry, what were you saying? You watched the recording? Oh, you'll watch the recording.
Yeah. I'll watch the recording. I'll set up a MindMeister mind map, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to stop streaming anyway.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Glad we did this.
It was awesome. I think we've got a good little energy going between you and I.